You've probably heard that it takes 10 to 15 years to break in as a screenwriter. But what if you could shorten that window? Psst, you can. If you're gonna take the time to tell a story, then tell a story that matters. We're starting with a metaphor, and I want you to imagine the ocean. But not just any ocean. This is the ocean of screenwriting success. The place where you find success in whatever way you imagine your measurable, tangible goal of success being as a screenwriter. So having your film premiere at a prestigious festival, finding a rep, selling a script, being hired to work on a major franchise, or anything in between. All of that resides here in this big ocean we're gonna call success. But you're over here, maybe Nebraska. And I have several friends in Nebraska, so it's not a bad place. It's just a metaphorical Nebraska. And you can't play in the ocean if you're in Nebraska. You know the ocean exists, and you know the screenwriting ocean is full of glorious and beautiful opportunities. And you also know that it's full of sharks and things that will straight up eat you for lunch.
Hello.
Well, hi!
And knowing those things about the ocean both excites and terrifies you.
Name's Bruce. It's all right, I understand. Why trust a shark, right?
But you are here, and your ocean of screenwriting success is way over here. And this area in the middle, in between, is first bordered by time. Everything between you and the ocean, between you and getting wet, will take time. You're here. You want to be there. And no matter how you look at it, time is going to be a factor. And time is actually the first obstacle that you have to deal with. I mean, some of you have more of it. Some of you are retired. Some of you are still in school. Some of you have families with young children, and your measurable goal for success might even change and shift as your life circumstances change and as you journey further along in the craft of screenwriting. The problem is, though, because our time is limited, most writers think that somehow, some way, no matter where they're currently at, whether it's Nebraska or Mississippi or wherever, once they decide that they're going to be a screenwriter and try to find success in whatever way they define it, that they will actually get wet from the ocean of success, that they can kind of just teleport there.
I've never beaten 3 people from 2 targets onto 1 pad before.
Landing anywhere in the ocean, and suddenly they are successful. That they can skip out of, around, or somehow through time, where they suddenly find themselves in the ocean of success. Oh, no, 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 no. If you were to just drop into the ocean at this point, that's where you get eaten.
Mine.
Or worse, that's where you die of exhaustion from swimming because you don't know how to navigate the ocean, or even what parts of the ocean are going to be friendlier and more receptive to the stories that you want to tell. This is the same mindset as viewing a screenplay as a magic ATM. I mean, all you have to do, wherever you are, sit down, bang out a script, and Hollywood will come knocking on your door. But that's about as likely to happen as the ocean suddenly washing up in the cornfields of Nebraska. The ocean of success doesn't come to you. You have to go to it, and it takes time for you to get from where you are at to the beach. How much time is up to you? In part, yeah, it depends on your life circumstances, but it also could depend on your natural talents, because the more naturally talented you are, the faster you'll be able to move from where you are to the beach. But in metaphorical Nebraska, you have no shot of getting wet. But on the beach, yeah, you can get wet. And to clarify, no, I am not saying you have to move to LA. This is a metaphor, remember. And in fact, you probably won't have to move to LA. You can be a professional screenwriter and find success from any geographic location, but using our metaphor, wherever you are at, wherever you're starting from, and more likely, you're starting somewhere in a place like Nebraska. If you want to find success as a screenwriter, you have to get to any beach to have a chance at the ocean getting you wet. So let's reframe how you're approaching finding success. I mean, you don't have to change what you define as success. Okay, the ocean's still there and you can get wet and there's plenty of water to go around. And just because I get wet doesn't mean that you now can't. I mean, there's a lot of ocean. So it's not that we're competing against one another in reality. We are supposed to be helping one another get to the beach. And even then, once we're on the beach, to then get close to the water's edge, close enough to get wet. But we need to talk about how to get first to the beach. We need to talk about the things that we need to learn, the obstacles we need to overcome just to get on the beach and have a shot at playing in the ocean of screenwriting success. So let's talk about reality survival shows for a hot second. And I'm not talking about Survivor because that one's a bit more gamified. I'm talking about the shows where people live in the desert or the jungle or the mountain wilderness areas for 30 days and have to hunt and find food and water and figure out how to manage the elements. I mean, those people, they don't just decide, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go do that. And then off they go. No, my friend. They learn, they practice, they study environments and plant and animal life. They learn how to make a fire and build a shelter from sticks and leaves. They learn how to stay warm, how to make basic medicine or treat wounds. There are obstacles they have to overcome before they step foot in the jungle or desert or mountain or wherever. And you are no different. You want to play in the ocean of screenwriting success? I mean, that's great. And I want to help you get there. But you have to spend time learning how to overcome the obstacles between you and the beach. And you have to learn how to survive before you get to the ocean, or a shark will eat you for lunch.
Dory, are you okay? Oh, that's good. Intervention!
You've probably heard the stories about new and aspiring writers being taken advantage of by some sharks in Hollywood. And there's a bunch of them. And I don't want you to become shark bait.
Shark bait!
What I want for you and what I'm good at and love doing is helping you get from where you are in the metaphorical Nebraska or wherever you're at to the beach at the ocean of the screenwriting success.
Shark bait!
And that by the time you get to the beach, you will have all the tools and skills you need to find success. That you are ready and prepared to get wet.
Welcome, brother Sharkbait.
Shark bait!
Enough with the Sharkbait.
Shark bait, ooh.
And more than that I can help you get there as fast as you want to get there. I'll circle back to that in a minute. Now, once you get to the beach, are there still things that you need to learn? Well, yes, of course. But if you properly prepare yourself for the ocean, once you get to the beach, once you can smell the salt in the air, you'll be able to recognize the sharks from the saints, and you will have the tools to navigate this industry, or at least you'll have people in your life that can help you navigate it. But right now, you're over here in Nebraska or wherever you're at, and we got a ways to go before we get to the ocean.
When life gets you down, you know what you gotta do?
I don't want to know what you gotta do.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim.
I've already mentioned that time is one obstacle that defines the space between where you are all the way to where you want to be. And one of the first things you have to do is make peace with the amount of time you have. If you aren't moving as fast as you want to move to the beach, then you either have to carve out more time or use the time you have in a more efficient way, or modify your expectations. Now, whichever one you choose, you've got to make peace with it. Time encompasses the other obstacles that I'm going to mention, and the speed at which you will move through all of these other obstacles is determined by how much time you want to spend. So I'm going to mention 4 additional obstacles in your way, the things between you and the ocean of success that are all governed by time. And then I'll lay out a couple of options that you have. But once you can masterfully navigate all of these obstacles, you're going to be ready to stand on the beach. You'll be in a position to be prepared to get wet. In fact, getting wet will more than likely become inevitable, and you will find success, the success you're looking for. And contrary to popular opinion, your success only has a very small amount to do with the whims of Hollywood and others in the film industry. I mean, new writers like to blame everyone else, and even the ocean itself, for not coming to their doorstep. Why don't they recognize me? Why don't they understand my genius, right? We're saying things like that. Advanced writers know that to find success, you have to position yourself for it. Now, if it helps, think about it from an industry perspective. If you are a producer or an agent, would you rather work with someone who doesn't even know where the beach is, much less how to get there, or would you rather work with someone who's currently standing on the beach? Yeah, of course. So your job is to get to the beach. And the first obstacle you have to master to get to that beach is the obstacle of story. Yes, a story is about someone who wants something badly, they're having trouble getting it, and they get it or they don't. Now, fundamentally, that's a story. But if that's all you know about story, okay, you're not there yet. You need to know how stories work, not just what they are, but what makes them tick. Now, for most of us, that means learning about things and terms like inciting incidents and plot points and midpoints and other story terms and how they function in a story. But you don't have to know those terms in that way. But it does help for you to know them because everyone in the ocean, everyone who's already there, expects you to know what those things are. So when they give you a note that says, I think the inciting incident needs to be sooner in your story, you know what they're talking about. And they know that you know what they're talking about. So all that stuff. So yeah, it helps to know the terms as everyone else knows them. But more than that, you have to know and understand their function. You have to learn about conflict and character wants and needs and all the things that make a story. And how do you write good dialogue? How do you write a scene? What is a scene? What's its function in a story? And sadly, this is the obstacle that a lot of aspiring writers want to skip. Everyone wants to just jump to the writing of the script. Now, I gotta be fair, can you learn the elements of story and how story works by practicing writing stories? By just sitting down and trying to write scripts? Well, yes, you can, but it's gonna take you a lot longer to learn, a lot longer. So you can try to just figure it out on your own. That's absolutely one way to do it. Or you can spend time focusing and studying specific elements, mastering little pieces along the way, which will then allow you to apply what you've learned into your writing much sooner. In fact, what happens is, you spend time learning all these terms and all these tools and all these resources that you have available to you, and you gotta spend time doing that. But once you do that, when you sit down to start writing, you just kind of automatically start integrating them. You don't have to think about them. When you start writing a script and you're on the beach, you don't have to think about what's the inciting incident. You already know. You're just automatically integrating it. But to be able to automatically integrate it, you've got to take the time to practice and hone and work on it and figure all these things out. In a way, it's kind of like drawing. I mean, can you learn to draw on your own? Well, yeah, sure you can. But let's say you want to draw for comics or graphic novels. So you spend time practicing drawing people. I mean, there's lots of people in comics and graphic novels. So I gotta be good at drawing faces and people and all that. And you just work on that over and over and over again. And you eventually get really good at drawing people. But then you gotta sit down and now you gotta draw a living room. Just a basic living room. Or a landscape on some other planet. Can you do that? No, you haven't practiced that yet. But if you backed up and spent time learning to draw basic shapes, learning how light and shadows work together, learning about depth of field, then you start to learn not only how to draw people, you learn how to draw places, things, anything, all of it, any of it, because you can then put all the pieces together naturally. And if you were to spend time learning the fundamentals of drawing versus someone who just tries to start drawing people, so you're over here, you're gonna learn the fundamentals. Somebody else, they're just gonna start drawing people. You're gonna be so much further down the road with the exact same amount of time spent working on the craft than they are. And if time isn't a big obstacle for you, I get there when I get there, then yeah, you can learn this stuff on your own, in your own time. Just practice drawing people or practice writing scenes, whatever it is you want to do, figure out that on your own. But if you don't want to spend as much time between where you are and where you want to be, okay, then you've got to spend some dedicated and focused time learning the fundamentals of story. That's the first obstacle. And then the fundamentals of storytelling, which is the next obstacle. Storytelling is a challenging thing to learn. And if you're not familiar with how I'm using this term, let me explain it simply. The story has to do with everything that happens in a story. The storytelling has to do with how that story is communicated to an audience and how the audience emotionally responds to the story, which is hopefully the way you want them to emotionally respond, at least if you're doing your job correctly. But for many of us, when we start out, we might think something is funny in our writing. We write it and we're like, oh, that's really funny, only to realize that when anyone else reads it, nobody laughs. I mean, not even cracks a smile, like, at all. Or we might think that if we tell a story in a certain way, it won't be confusing. So we're going to tell it out of order, and if we do it this way, it's not going to be confusing. The audience is going to be able to track with it, only to realize that the audience is so confused when they read the story that they can't even tell us what the story is about, if they even read to the end of the script. And just like with story, there are tools of storytelling that you have at your disposal. And the different tools do different things, and they elicit different emotional responses out of your audience. But to navigate the obstacle of storytelling, you have to not only learn what the tool is, you have to learn what emotional response it elicits from the audience. So when it comes to learning what the tool is, yeah, you can just do this like learning what story is. You can learn about the tools, you hear about a tool, you can figure out how it works, you figure out how to use it. You can even learn what it's supposed to do in an audience. But at this point, it's time to start practicing the craft. Learning how to fully storytell is something that takes practice. It takes failing and figuring out why something failed. It takes people critiquing your work and giving you feedback on it. So yes, you can learn storytelling on your own, at least up to a point. Eventually, you are going to need some feedback and help to get your storytelling on track. So you now know about the obstacles of story and of storytelling. But then we get to the next obstacle, which is navigating the process of writing a screenplay. Now, if you know what a story is and you've practiced telling them, okay, now comes the big test, writing an entire screenplay, figuring out the idea, planning it out, however you decide to do that, drafting the script, then revising it, ultimately polishing it so you have a good story that's well told. And it's not just getting through the process, it's doing it enough and learning enough tools to find the most efficient and effective way of navigating the process of writing a screenplay for the specific screenplay you are trying to tell. And it's different with every screenplay. And in this process, the first thing you have to do is come up with an idea. But not just any idea is gonna work. Okay, you need to learn how to craft good and marketable ideas. Ideas that other people will be interested in if you were to somehow manage to write the perfect script for that idea. So do you know what a good idea is? Would you recognize one of your own as a good idea or not? Or do you just think that any idea is a good one? You've got an idea like, oh, that'll be a great movie, and you sit down and start writing it. Okay, it may not be a good idea. Have you ever written out the basic idea for 50 different stories? 50 different ideas or 100? I mean, how do you come up with ideas? Where do you find them? And once you have a good idea, how do you plan the story? Should you use a beat sheet, note cards, formal outline, a story model like the story circle or Save the Cat or the hero's journey or a host of others? How much do you plan your characters or build out the world? What about scriptments or treatments? Or do you just say, screw it, and start writing? And when you get to scripting, well, how does that go? I mean, how much do you write every day? How do you get to the end? When you feel you've gone off the rails somewhere in the middle, like, I kind of went off the rails. So do you go to the end? Do you start over? Can you actually get to the end? How do you navigate subplots and supporting characters and even things that are basic and simple like screenplay format? Can you recognize the problems that occur in the second act? Because there are common ones. And do you have strategies for how to fix any of them? And once you get to the end, so now you've got a draft, you get to the end, well, then what? I mean, how do you revise? How do you approach revision? How can you figure out what you need to work on? And in what order should you do it? And how much revision is enough or too much? And when should you begin to start tweaking dialogue and description length and word choice? And is your story still making sense? And is the audience feeling what you want them to feel when you want them to feel it? That's the process. And you can't learn all of that in writing just one script. Now, maybe, okay, just maybe, you catch lightning in a bottle on your first script out, and that will be awesome. But can you replicate it? Can you do it again? And if not, you aren't familiar with the process. You aren't confident in your abilities in the process. And what if you sell that lightning in a bottle script and someone then wants to hire you to rewrite a story they have and they give you a treatment? Would you know what to do next? Could you get from a treatment to the end? Can you do that? This is what navigating the process takes. And this is honestly the obstacle that no one seems to recognize until they're standing at the bottom of it, staring up at it and thinking, oh, I got to get over that. And if you have figured out what a story is and what makes a story work, and you figured out how to tell that story and the order in which you need to tell it, but you can't confidently navigate the process of writing a screenplay, my friend, you're in trouble. Now, candidly, the best way I have found through this obstacle is to straight up attack it. You have an idea for a screenplay. That's awesome. go write it. Don't judge yourself on how well you execute it. Don't worry about if the idea has merit. It's your first time out. Just go for it. Your job is to get through the process, to have some experience, to begin to know what helps and what doesn't. And then do it again. Write another screenplay. Go through the process. No two stories are the same. No two stories are told exactly alike. And no process is exactly the same. Of all the screenplays I've written, I've never written them all exactly the same way. The process changes every time because the story changes every time. I mean, there's some markers along the way, and you have to start learning how to recognize those markers, but the process of writing screenplays changes every time you approach it. And do you have the skill set to confidently approach any screenplay, not just that one that you're working on? So yeah, you can and should start this one on your own, and you can keep working on your own if you like. You'll eventually get there. You're gonna make it to the beach, but just know that it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, and it'll take a lot of time if you do it on your own. Again, if time's not an issue, okay, just buckle in and go.
Get ready! Your exit's coming up, man! Where? I don't see it!
Right there! I see it! I see it!
You mean the swirling vortex of terror? That's it, dude! Of course it is!
And that brings us to the fourth obstacle, and it's one that most screenwriters don't like: marketing. At some point, you're going to be standing on the beach, okay? You're going to get to the beach, and you have to get the ocean's attention. You're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to, in a sense, bait a hook and start throwing out your line. And you have to know what kind of bait attracts what kind of opportunities. The bait for contests is different than the bait for the blacklist, and it's different than the bait for different production companies. Even production companies have a wide-ranging palette. So how do you package yourself? How do you take a meeting? How do you send a query? How do you entice someone, anyone, to become interested in your screenplay that you've worked so hard on and that you spent hours and hours learning the craft with? Because it's a shame if you spend all this time learning story, learning storytelling, becoming proficient at the process of writing a script, only to be cast aside because you don't know how to get anyone's attention, or you don't know how to put yourself out there, or even you don't even have a strategy. You don't even know where to begin. Here's the thing with these obstacles. The best way to learn them isn't in silos. It's not like, okay, go learn this one, then move on to that one, then move on to the next. Okay, it's a little like, it's a little of this, a little of that, back to this, some new stuff, back to that, then this, then more stuff. You get the gist, right? You're moving in and out of them. Each of them informs the other. As you learn things in one, it informs something else you learn in another. They overlap in a sense. They are all, after all, part of screenwriting. But you have some options at this point, and one option that I've mentioned is just going solo. I mean, you can 100% get to the beach on your own, especially with the resources you have at your disposal. There are several books on screenwriting, way more books on screenwriting than when I started, and you even have YouTube, which I didn't have, and there are lots of other free and low-cost resources to help you get there and navigate these obstacles on your own. And if you are in no hurry, then you should absolutely stay on that path, and you will find the success that you are looking for in time. But my guess is that not all of you watching this want to take the long route. The 10 to 15 year route you hear touted and thrown around, yeah, you don't want that. And I'm not about to promise you some magic pill, so don't get your hopes up. I'm not going to give you a magic pill. I'm going to tell you about me. When I started screenwriting, my first measurable goal was to have someone in the industry request to read my stuff and give me positive feedback on it. That was it for me. It wasn't about selling anything, although I hope that eventually that would happen. And it wasn't about writing a story in the Star Wars universe, although I still hope that will happen.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It was literally about getting in the door, that someone read what I had written and tell me it was good, that I was on the right track, I was on the right path, that I was getting on the beach. And I figured, and reflecting back, I figured correctly, that if I could regularly get people to read my stuff and they responded positively to it, whether they bought it or not, that I will have earned my spot on the beach, that I will have positioned myself to succeed. And I tried to learn screenwriting, but the books were few and far between, and as I've mentioned, YouTube didn't exist, and neither did Google for that matter. Plus, at the time, I lived in Michigan, and while I loved living in Michigan, and while there's a lot of great people there, I still have dear friends that live there, I didn't know any screenwriters.
Good afternoon. We're gonna have a great jump today.
It's like he's trying to speak to me. I know it.
So I was working on a master's degree in English because of my job. That was all I could do. That was the closest thing I could get to creative writing or screenwriting or anything. And I was taking, while I was there, every film and creative writing course I could fit in my schedule that the university offered. And I began to learn about story, because story is story is story. The medium might change, okay? That impacts how you tell the story. But stories are stories, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a short story, a novel, whatever it is, a play, doesn't matter, okay? A story is a story is a story. And I started learning about stories. But it was hit or miss. I mean, it was hard to find the information I needed. There was a lot of trial and error, and when I'd learn something, sometimes I'd have to back up and relearn something else because I wasn't learning it in an efficient or an effective way. And I decided then that if I ever had the opportunity, I would crack this nut and I'd teach new writers in a better, more efficient way. And I practiced trying to write screenplays. And I had no idea if I was doing it right or not. I mean, my first scripts were written in some word processing software. And I don't even remember if it was WordPerfect or Microsoft Word or what. And I was just shooting in the dark. I mean, just trying to get to the end, to have something completed. I didn't care if it was good or not. I mean, I wanted it to be, but I didn't care. I just wanted to have something done. And I finished one script and I started the next one, trying to learn the process. And it was a lot of trial and error, mostly error. And again, I decided if I ever had the opportunity, I would crack this nut of the process and I'd help other writers learn to try to navigate the writing process in a better and more efficient way. Now, at this point, I was writing a lot, which for me meant a couple of scripts a year, mostly in TV, but I was also writing a few features. And I was accepted. I'd applied and I got accepted into USC's film school in their screenwriting program. Only 30 of us that year out of several thousand who apply. I mean, this wasn't yet success for me, but I knew I was getting closer. And while I was in school, I wasn't just learning and pay attention to the craft elements that I needed and wanted to know, just for me. I was also trying to learn and figure out what worked, what didn't in the teaching, in the process, what would make it better and faster and easier for others who didn't know anything or who were just starting to get across the obstacles faster than I had, so I could make it better for those who came after me, that I could in some way help them transform themselves into the screenwriters that they wanted to be. Film school and what I learned there got me access to some reps who requested my stuff. They didn't all spark to it though, but I was starting to get some good feedback. And then one of my scripts, a TV pilot, got the attention of a producer. And that script was not only read by people at several networks, it almost got sold at CBS, which is kind of unheard of. Rarely do they buy new pilots from brand new writers. But I'll never forget one meeting I had during all this process, and it was a meeting where I knew at that moment I had arrived on the beach. We were talking about my pilot, and the person I was sitting with then asked me, "So what else do you have?" And I knew, I learned enough that I know I needed to have an answer that was ready. And I actually had a couple of options to choose from, and I picked the one that I thought he would like, and he did. And he asked me to set up an appointment with his assistant for a couple of weeks out to come back and formally pitch him that idea. He liked my writing, he liked my stuff, he liked my ideas, and he invited me back. And while I didn't sell that project, and while he did like the new project and we met about it a few times, I'll never forget that bungalow on the CBS lot where I was invited back to stand on the beach, now with my toes in the water. So from when I started screenwriting to that moment took me 13 years. Now, I don't want it to take that long for you. That's one reason I have this channel. But maybe you want to move a lot faster. Maybe you want to take advantage of what I've learned and honed, because I went from someone who didn't know anything about screenwriting to becoming a master storyteller who now has opportunities to tell stories that matter to a world who needs to hear them. And I can help you get from wherever you are at and get you standing on the beach. I can't help you get wet, okay? In fact, there are others who, if you want their help, can get your toes right up to the water's edge. people like Scriptfella, who has a channel here on YouTube. And if you've watched any of his videos, he shoots straight just like I do, but his focus is on getting you off the beach and into the water. And if you think you're ready, click on the description of any of his videos and get the information to get in touch with Dominic. He's been there a lot more often than I have, and he can help you out. But if you're still somewhere in Nebraska, here's the things I have that can help you get to the beach. The Screenwriting Fast Track will help you with these two obstacles: story and storytelling. That course is a work at your own pace course because I know time is an issue. There are even various tiers you can choose from if you have other resource limitations. An essentials tier, which is the bare bones minimum, a complete tier, which is a lot more robust, and you'll even get some feedback from me along the way, and a premium tier, which will be a boon to you and really put you on the fast track of these two obstacles. But I also have a coaching program, the Screenplay Navigator, which does just that. Helps you learn to navigate the process of writing a screenplay. Everything from idea to polished draft, and even some marketing stuff along the way. And while that program does have a loose schedule of writing 3 screenplays a year, you can also work at your own pace. We have group calls every 2 weeks, and I and other students give you feedback along the way. And you learn to give feedback to others. Plus, as part of the Navigator, you also get 1 year's worth of access to the Screenwriting Fast Track Premium course. So doing the Navigator helps you learn to navigate all of the obstacles: story, storytelling with the Fast Track, and process and marketing with the Navigator. And time, because of the structure of these learning opportunities, you can take as much or as little time as you want. You can move quickly, or you can just take your time moving through them, but you're still going to be moving faster than you would on your own. And in taking advantage of them, you're going to have the opportunity to transform yourself into a master storyteller. You're going to be able to get on the beach. The Navigator is something you have to apply to, though. It's easy to apply, and all it entails is you signing up for a time for a conversation, free conversation with me. You need to have written a couple of scripts. You need to have finished a couple of scripts so that you are at least a little familiar with the process of writing a screenplay. Remember, practice helps you kind of learn some of the initial things right off the bat. And in doing that, you will have started to also learn a little bit about story and storytelling. And one other component is you need to be willing to learn and help others who are also learning along the way. You are a co-traveler, a co-navigator. You want to help other people just like they should want to help you. Let me break this down. If you have time to spend, if time is not an obstacle to you, like you can get there on your own, you're totally fine with that. Maybe you're just doing it as a hobby. It'd be nice if someday it happened. Totally fine, work on it on your own time. Don't do my courses or programs, or anyone else's for that matter. Just take your time, practice, read, learn. You're gonna get there. If you want to move faster though, I can help you get to the beach. I spent 13 years and over $120,000 on 2 graduate degrees that enabled me to find my first kernel of success. And honestly, I'm not proud that I spent that much money. I wish I hadn't spent that much money, but if I hadn't, it would have taken me even longer to get there. You have other options. Okay, you have other avenues available to you. So if you're interested in checking either of those 2 things out, the Screenwriting Fast Track or the Screenplay Navigator, links are below for that. If you want to go it on your own though, you can definitely do that. And you can find out what are some great books on screenwriting and books you need to be familiar with when it comes to screenwriting by watching this video right here. And whatever path you take to the beach to find success in the screenwriting ocean, when you tell a story that matters. See you later.